I had never written a screenplay, but Richard Linklater asked me to co-write with him. And all he knew is that he wanted to write a boy meets girl story. And I think to a lot of people of your generation, it just seems very romantic. You guys have the benefit that we're in the midst of a bunch of change. They said, I'm going to tell AI to write a scene for Before Sunrise. It was,
If you were to meet like a new screenwriter at a coffee shop, what would you tell them?
you need to be true to yourself. The deeply personal is what connects with other people's deeply personal. I'm not a big fan of screenwriting books because I had never taken a film class or read a screenwriting book when I wrote a screenplay with Richard Linklater, Before Sunrise. I think that you are actually an expert at story just because you're a human being, and human beings are storytelling animals.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the First Act Break podcast, the show where we break down the art, business, and hustle of breaking into the film industry today. We have a really special guest with us today, Kim Krizan, the co-creator of the Before trilogy. She's worked with the filmmaker Richard Linklater numerous times, and now she runs a Patreon page supporting and helping young screenwriters who are trying to make their first films. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Kim, one of the first films that I watched during the pandemic was Before Sunrise.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was a very lonely time, but that film reminded me the power of cinema and the way it can help us connect. So I did also just want to start by asking, what was it like bringing that story to life, about 20 to 30 years ago?
Yeah, 30 years ago. It was very personal because it's a personal story. I had done a lot of traveling. I traveled alone. I traveled by train, and I had never written a screenplay, but Richard Linklater asked me to co-write with him. And all he knew is that he wanted to write a boy meets girl story. And I suggested that we use my train travels as a kind of jumping off point. So it felt really personal. And in all honesty, I did not know if the script was going to ever come to fruition, if it was going to be produced. You know how hard it is. It's extremely difficult to get a script produced. And I had no idea at all, but back then I really had no idea. And so it felt like having my something very personal about my life and my experience put out to the world, which is a really surreal thing.
Absolutely. And there's such a huge fan base of the film even today, especially in like a very tech-centric era. So why do you think the Before trilogy still resonates with audiences today?
My guess would be that it caught the tail end of an era because we have gone through this, I mean, major earthquake, which is the internet, which has changed the way, and you guys grew up with the internet. So I remember I was born in the final decades of the last era, and I can see what it's like to go from that era when we did not have the connection with the whole world in the same way. We did not have cell phones in our pockets. We did not have Google. We did not have social media. And we met people and communicated in another way. And I think to a lot of people of your generation, it just seems very romantic. And it was very romantic. It was very personal. You had a lot of mental space and quiet, and everybody read books like mad back then. There was a lot of alone time and a lot of face to face time back then. So things were very different. And I think that your generation romanticizes it to a large degree.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's a huge way that our generation is kind of missing out because we really don't get the experience of seeing someone and then not immediately trying to find their online presence because that's such a huge part of our life now.
You Google them, right? To see if
Yeah,
they're a serial killer or
yeah.
something.
I'm not sure if you've seen the movie The Worst Person in the World. I've got a poster behind me here, but there's a scene that's exactly like that, and it's also a romantic comedy. But um,
Oh, sounds great.
speaking of technology and just the rise of interconnectedness online, there are actually pros to having this interconnectedness, and one of the ways that you have been able to utilize that is running your Patreon page or platform called The Magic Hour with Kim Krizan. So I was wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit about how you got started and what the journey's been like so far, helping younger creatives find their voice.
Well, the very first social media I got on, I was really late coming to the social media game because I was kind of cynical about it. I just thought, oh, brother, this has got to be shallow. But I ended up liking it quite a bit. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was that people from all over the world wrote to me about Before Sunrise and told me how it touched them. And that came as a real surprise to me. I didn't know how many people were touched all over the world, people in India, people in Asia, people in South America, people in Europe. It was just like, wow. And everybody seemed to ask me for advice about writing and how they could do their own personal story. And after sending responses a ton of times, I finally realized I should just start my own little page so that I actually made it for people who are, say, students. I made it extremely inexpensive so that it would be basically the cost of meeting me at like a Starbucks and each of us getting a drink and sharing a cookie or something like that. I made it that inexpensive because I thought these people generally don't have a lot of money, but I would like them to be able to subscribe, and then it will be like me giving some writing tips or creativity tips, which I always do in my creative writing classes because I've taught at the college level for a long time. And I feel like a lot of people are just hungry for some inspiration, and so that's what I try to give on the Patreon is some inspiration and some encouragement.
That's so beautiful. And honestly, I think that is what is very needed today because there's a lot of, information, a lot of bad information as well. So having someone professionally in the industry giving advice like over almost like a coffee chat, I think it's so invaluable to students like us. And thank you for that.
Oh, my
Um,
pleasure.
yeah, and I do wonder, like, seeing a lot of interacting with a lot of new screenwriters, what do you think are some of the most like common mistakes that new screenwriters are making today?
Well, first of all, people are afraid of a lot of things that are just normal and natural. Like a lot of people are fearful that they're not going to be original. And I just did a Patreon on this just a couple weeks ago. The fact is that you cannot help but be original because you're going to be inspired by a lot of things in this life, and you can't help it. And but when you tell your story is going to come out your way because you are an individual. So I tend to tell people to free themselves up and don't be hemmed in by fears. It's very helpful to tell yourself that you're allowed to write a piece of crap, is how I say it to my students, because when you just let yourself play around with something, you will explore. And if you say to yourself, this has to be really good, you will shut yourself down. So if you're sitting down to write, if you say to yourself, listen, I'm not going to show this to anybody at all until I'm ready. And so just let yourself play with an idea and then don't show it to people for a good long time and let yourself sit with it and goof around. I think that that's really my forte is I tell people, I don't want you to go to your mean critic friend who, who's a big film buff and is going to say, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that and don't do this and don't do that, because that scares the artist in you. The artist in you is a child, and the artist in you is very vulnerable and sensitive. And I don't want you to scare that kid. That kid needs freedom to play. Just like when you were a child, you would play with your toys or your imagination for hours and hours. And hopefully you didn't have some mean person come in there and tell you you were stupid, because that's not healthy for you. Part of growing is playing.
Right. And I do wonder because, I think protecting that is so important. But how do you determine if what you are writing is good? Because a lot of times we write things that are very personal, but we just don't know if that's something other people would also like. So how do you find the balance in that?
Well, it's very subjective, it's super subjective. We are influenced sometimes wrongly by other people. And so my way is I sort of shut myself off from, like, for example, if I am curious about a movie, I don't read reviews, because I find that people often jump on a bandwagon. And I don't read reviews generally of books or of movies or of anything. I just give things a try and know that things are very subjective. Nobody bought Vincent van Gogh's paintings when he was alive. And some of us might say, oh, that's a terrible tragedy. But I don't think it is, really, because he led the life he wanted to live. He painted for years in beautiful countrysides in France. After he died, people understood, or, maybe our taste just came around or something. But now his paintings sell for many millions of dollars on auction. So I think that I really believe strongly, you need to be true to yourself. And you will find other people that get you. And you will find people that don't get you. I mean, as far as Before Sunrise goes, I know that the people that like the movie are my people. And there are some people that don't like the movie and think they'd rather watch paint dry on the wall. And that's totally fine. It's totally fine. They're not my people. I probably would not really click with them. And that is fine. You're allowed to have your own taste. You're allowed to have what you like. And I think you should stand up for yourself and what you like. And if somebody does give you a bit of criticism and it resonates with you instantly, where you're like, oh yes, that's so good, then listen. But if somebody says something to you, they don't like what you did, blah, 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 and it doesn't hit right, just ignore it. It's just not for you, So be true to yourself.
That's
Yeah.
beautifully said. And that's something that I relate to personally a lot, and I'm sure Jiayang also relate to.
Mhm.
Something I did want to also touch on is um, once you find your voice, once you find your authenticity, how do you create healthy writing habits to actually bring your ideas to life? One of the harder parts of screenwriting is to stay consistent and to have a consistent output of ideas and then put them. I think this is Jordan Peele who said that he's shoving sand so that eventually he can build a castle out of the sand. So how do you go about collecting the sands in the first place?
I think you should keep a journal that's a private journal that you don't show to anybody. The reason why you don't want to show it to anybody is so your writing style can grow naturally. But I think you should hide. I think you hide this away now, hide it away, and then when you start out, you just tell yourself you're just going to talk about a feeling that came to you, or an experience or a memory, or even complain. Complaining is really healthy for you in your journal. Or write a letter to somebody that you've been wanting to express something to, good or bad, that you don't necessarily send. And the more you do that, it first of all, it gives you this wonderful emotional outlet where you attach words to your feelings and experiences. You attach words to, you describe, and that way you start developing your own way of communicating. It's literal writing practice, but it's also a kind of meditation for you to get calm. And some people like do yoga, or they meditate, or they go for a run or something. But writing in a journal, if you know that it's just for you, is very calming and gets your brain waves nice and slowed down and at peace, so they're not in that staticky place where we are when we're all filled with worries and anxieties. And if you find yourself doing this regularly, you will develop a writing style just very naturally without trying to. And you will be influenced by those writers you love, because you love them for a reason. It's because you saw some of yourself in them. That's why you loved what you loved. But I'm a big believer in a nice journal, because you will be starting stories even though you don't know it, because something new will start up in your life, and then there's a big drama, but you're in the midst of it and you don't know, like, oh God, I'm in the midst of it's right now, and then it'll wrap up. And you won't know that either, except with hindsight. So you'll start to see beginnings and endings, and then you'll see the arcs in between the beginnings and the endings. So over time, you will tell a bunch of stories in your journal. But just be mindful, hide it away so that you can incubate in peace.
I'm gonna start doing that now. That's a really good idea. And I do wonder, because you speak a lot of you're putting your own life into your work. And I wonder, like, first of all, how much of the Before trilogy writing is inspired by the things in your life? And also, how do you find the courage to kind of put your own life and be vulnerable, in your work to show to other people?
Well, Before Sunrise was based partially on my train experiences. And of course, we used a lot of poetic license to amp up the drama. I did meet, on one trip, I met this guy as I was sitting next to him at a concert, and we liked each other, so some of that went in there. And then on another trip, I sat across from a guy for hours and hours on another train trip, and we ended up running into each other at the train station after we got off, and we were like, let's just go sightsee for a while, because I was staying in Paris and he had to go on to his home, but we just sight saw. And so there is some personal that went in there. I also met like cool females that I just hung out with and palled around with and went sightseeing with, or we went and found a youth hostel together, or that kind of thing. I met this cool married couple and we went to Stonehenge, the three of us, and that was fun. So there is some personal that went in there. I think, though, I have to tell you that when your personal life goes into things, you do kind of feel exposed. And I'll never forget this wonderful quote I read by the punk rock singer Debbie Harry, who's in Blondie. She said that she felt that when she put some really personal thing into a song, and then she was singing it out to the world, she would feel like her face got red and hot, and she would be like, oh God, it's so personal. But that might be the hit song. So sometimes the deeply personal is what connects with other people's deeply personal. Unless we're serial killers, our deeply personals are healthy. It's like, our deeply personal is not some violent, horrible thing. Our deeply personals are generally like long, like they're human. they're human, like longing, and we also experience anger, and we also experience feelings of defeat, and I think that's why certain movies resonate with us, is because we see the movie and the character says something and we're like, oh, I feel that way, and that's why we end up loving the movie. So I think that's what artists are good at, is giving a lot of personal to their art. So you get better at it with time.
Yeah, that's again beautifully said. And I do feel like a lot of first-time filmmakers who make their first feature films, it tends to be a very personal story, or at least have very personal elements to it. So I have a question. Say hypothetically that a filmmaker or screenwriter has their first screenplay finished. They've polished it over the course of 6 months or even years. They've sent it out to peers for review, and everyone likes it. It's finished, it's locked. What should they do next to bring it to life?
This is the question. It is so hard. It's hard to get things out in the world. Trust me, and I don't have a normal experience, because a person who had made his own first film, Slacker. He cast me as a character in Slacker. He had kind of lucked out in that he found some producers who were very interested, and that was at a time when they were hunting for, like arty small movies. I think things have really changed since then. But we also live in a time of tremendous change and upheaval. So, one thing that you guys have the benefit that we're in the midst of a bunch of change, and that could be a good thing. And, you're fast on your feet, you're giving your story out. When you meet somebody who who says, I'm looking for a movie, give it to them, but don't sign it over. Don't sign contracts and things very quickly. Don't do that. But show your work to people. When you do this, you have to kind of have a thick skin, but show your work to people. And what you're doing is you're sort of like that metaphor, you throw spaghetti at the wall hoping something will stick. You hope that someday you'll meet somebody that has either the brains or the good luck or the talent or the good fortune or whatever it is, that they are in a good position to get your movie made. Or it's really, there's luck, there's timing, and there's just working hard. So finish your story, show it to as many people as possible. Go out into go back into your laboratory and or your office and make more scripts. But one thing I tell my students, you've got the technology with your phone to shoot short films, maybe even feature films. You've got the technology to edit. You guys are way better than me with technology, and I can do some stuff. so you guys can make short films and make films, and you can spread them on Instagram or YouTube or whatever you want, and the technology and all these social media formats can be a way to go. I'm hoping for your sake, because things are in upheaval right now, and I don't know the real answer.
Honestly, it is kind of scary, but I think most of us are staying optimistic that we can utilize social media and embrace the change that's coming, and tell our stories in other mediums than the traditional way. And I hear you speak a lot about short films, and I do wonder, like, what is an approach to writing short films that's different than with feature films? Because I feel like feature films have like a lot of like structural, like kind of like rules almost, but shorts can be literally anything. Some don't even have like genuine like conflict or something like that. So I just do wonder, what is an approach to writing like successful short films?
Oh, successful. I guess it depends on your definition of successful, but I will never forget that many, many years ago, long before the internet, there was some kind of little show on PBS, and there was a girl, she was a teenage girl, and she had her parents gave her a little camera, a little moving camera, and she was making short films in her bedroom with just herself alone. And I thought, God, that girl is so, like, she was doing really interesting things, like taking pictures of her face and moving around the room. And I thought, God, I mean, honestly, I think part of the thing was limitation. So maybe what my answer to you is limitations. Like, you know how when Picasso didn't have enough money to buy paint, and he went through this period called the blue period because he could only buy one paint, blue paint. So maybe the thing is, don't, just have limited materials, limited space, and maybe even limited time. And maybe that's the way to go. I know for myself that sometimes if I have a ticking clock and I have to do something, like someone is expecting me to send something tomorrow, that gives me the juice because I don't have all the time in the world. I just have to sit down and bang something out. So maybe limit yourself dramatically and, think of it as like Picasso's blue period. Maybe it's your bedroom short, or your, the apartment complex short, or, you and your pets or something,
Right. I think that's something what's really cool about some of the classes at USC is that they give you these limitations that you can get creative with it. And it's really cool to see.
Good
Yeah,
idea.
totally. And I'm curious, right now, within, I want to say, the past 3 to 4 years or so, there is definitely a trend of younger filmmakers who are up and coming, making short films first as a form of proof of concept for a
Mm,
feature complete story that they're hoping to make. I was
mhm.
wondering if you have any insights, maybe based on your experience with your Patreon members. Maybe they have an idea that they want to develop into a feature down the line, and maybe have a shortened version of it and go into production to make the short to help others see their vision first and then translate it into a complete film. I was wondering if you have any insights on that route.
I think that's a good idea. So, one thing I always teach my students as we are analyzing movies, feature film length, is I tell them, first of all, to look at the first minute of the movie, look at the first few minutes of the movie, and then to look at the first 10 minutes of a movie. And I haven't really read this or seen this anywhere else, but if you notice the first 10 minutes, well, first of all, the first minute of a movie is often very powerful and gives a lot of information. The first few minutes of a movie usually introduces a lot, but the first 10 minutes of a movie almost make a complete story. I know it jumps off at a weird spot, but if you watch your favorite movies, watch the first 10 minutes and notice that very often you've got almost a complete story in the first 10 minutes. So I would shoot for 10 minutes and then stop there. Maybe you've got a short, maybe shoot that. It's almost like you're shooting the pilot, and then later, if you have, the money, the backing, the whatever, you can jump off and do the other, 80 or 90 minutes if you want, or 100 minutes, but I think that's one way to do it, is those first crucial, all important, that the introduction of character, the main character, the introduction of what I call their world, and the introduction of their problem. Those should happen right away in a story. Certainly in the first few minutes, but most definitely in the first 10 minutes. You get the character, their world, and their problem.
Yeah, I think it's so important nowadays with people's like attention spans also being lower to like immediately grab them and pull them into the story. And I talking about that, like how do you see the effect of like short form, the TikToks and stuff like Instagram videos that are just, 10, 20 seconds long. How do you see that affecting the modern audience when it comes to like watching movies?
Oh, I think it's shortening our attention spans. I think even my attention span is shorter now because a movie seems like a long commitment to me now. But yeah, I'm noticing that I'm on Instagram and I'm noticing that within a minute, I want to feel a lot of emotional juice and satisfaction in, 60 seconds or so. So it's I think that this is going to shorten our attention spans. It will introduce a new type of story to us. I'm imagining that as we move on into the future, that we'll be consuming more quickly. And they call it the shallows, which worries me a little bit because I was a literature major and a psychology major, and everything was about diving in very deeply, and I enjoyed doing that. And I worry that might be something we're losing a little bit, is we're skimming along the surface too fast. It's good for our brains to slow down and calm down, because to go too fast does create a lot of anxiety. And they're saying that younger generations are experiencing depression and anxiety. And I think it's just because there's too much information too fast. You're getting too many ugly images of, like, disasters around the world that aren't good for you, not good for you. You can't absorb that. So I think it's really important that you give yourself space to slow down. Watch your feature films. Like, even I watch movies over and over if they really touch me. I try to figure out what it is that touches me. I watch them over and over and over. But also, books, and a good long walk is certainly one of the best things for creativity. A good long drive is one of the best things for getting if you're struggling with an idea, a good long drive, a good long walk, stand in your shower. These things where you're not looking at a screen help your brain so much.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Kim, I'm not familiar. Are you from LA? Are you living in LA area?
Yeah, I live in LA now. I was born in the LA area. I lived in Texas for a while. That's where I met Richard Linklater. But now I live in the LA area now. I'm actually not that far away from you guys at USC.
Oh, nice. So I asked because I wonder if there's any good spots you go to feel inspired in LA area or places you take a drive to or a hike at.
Oh, you know that we've got like the most beautiful gorgeous beaches here, and they're often kind of empty, which is crazy because they're free to everybody.
Mhm.
They're just totally free, free places to park. And they are such one of the greatest places to air your head out is to go to the beach and just walk along the beach. But LA is really good we've got some great parks. It's not the best walking town, which,
Yeah.
because we are such a commuter city, a driving town. But so it would have to be the beach. And then, if you go in the other direction, we have mountains and deserts and all that. But I would say, like since we are all in Los Angeles, and it would take us maybe, I'm guessing if we're around the same area, 30 or 40 minutes maybe to get ourselves down to the beach and parked. That's where we should go. And just that nature and all those good, whatever that is, the negative ions or whatever that is we get at the ocean, that's the place to go and think about your story. Or don't think about your story, and it'll just come to you magically.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
awesome. Yeah.
I
I
yeah, I gotta utilize the beaches more often.
I think that's something I think both of us struggle with is I think I'll speak for myself, but I get stuck with an idea for so long that sometimes a walk outside just for like 5 to 10 minutes even, like it such a breath of fresh air that when you sit back down, like you feel really reinvigorated and are ready to tackle the story from almost a different angle sometimes.
If you're feeling really bogged down, give yourself a day off where you go do something fun. Like one of my students, I made my students go do something fun when I told them that they had been studying too much, go do something fun. And one of my students went to an aquarium because they liked fish, and they spent the whole day looking at the fishies, and they said that they got so energized from doing that. Another student of mine went to a museum, another student went to the beach, another student went camping for the night and scared himself half to death because he could hear the animals in the middle of the night. But anyway, so if you're really getting bogged down, give yourself like a whole, if you can't do a whole day, like give yourself a whole afternoon or something, because it's really good for your creativity.
Totally, I completely agree. And I did want to ask, just because we were talking about attention span and shorter form content, what do you think the role of films, longer traditional form, hour and a half to 2 hour and a half movies, what is their role in our life when it's so saturated with content? And how does cinema differentiate itself from shorter form content?
Well, okay, so feature films are not that old, right? They are roughly, 100 years old, a little bit more than 100 years old. So it's not like this is some ancient format. But then if we attach that to plays, people used to go watch plays that were pretty long, maybe a few hours long. They had incredible attention spans back then. Even people who were relatively uneducated used to go in the standing section. We're talking 500 years ago, or so, standing section of the play, and of the audience of the play. And so I think that things are evolving now. I believe that feature films are going to evolve. I don't exactly know how, but I think it's a possibility they may be shorter. I mean, or the television series is now, um, a half an hour segments that go on, or sometimes hour long segments that go on. People love that, but they're only required really to devote short pieces of, an hour or half an hour, and then maybe they can't watch again because they're busy. So I'm thinking that things are evolving. I'm thinking, like some people are saying the movie theaters are just flat out dying, that we're going to watch at home from now on. We're going to watch on our devices. Um, so I often think about the golden years of Hollywood, which, I mean, they created so many incredible movies, but the people were like factory workers. They did not, that was a hard life. And so it wasn't like a dream for everybody. So I'm imagining things are changing, and individuals are creating content now. You guys are creating content now. Everybody's creating their own content now. So I kind of wonder if we're going to just have, oh gosh, you know, it's this big world of voices and eyes, uh, I don't know what's happening, but it's going to be interesting to observe, and you guys are going to really see this over the course of your lives.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. And I just a kind of a follow-up to that. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Before Sunrise is, if we all talk about how great technology is and how it saves all this time, what good is saved time if nobody uses it? how do we free ourselves from the distractions of information online, with a lot of which are misinformation and noise and quick dopamine boosts? How do we stay true to ourselves and really create, but also take in stuff that's more soul nourishing rather than the opposite?
Oh, that's such a good question because we're all addicted now because of the dopamine boosts that you're talking about. We've all been addicted now. I think um, keep a journal so that you have a place to be alone with your thoughts and have the discipline. And this is not easy to do, I fully admit this, but have the discipline to maybe have build it into either your day or your week where either you shut the screens off a certain number of hours before you go to bed or shut the screens off one day a week and just read, go for walks, talk to people face to face. You might come up with a system that works for you. I used to have my students do something called a media diet or a media fast, where I asked them to try. Now, I wouldn't dare to do this now. I said a whole week, and we can't do it anymore for a whole week. But back when I was doing it, I'd say try to go for a whole week without watching television and see what happens. And everybody said, oh my God, I calmed down so much. I had all these great creative thoughts bubble to the surface. I wrote all my ideas down. And I was like, yes, because instead of taking in and being a receiver, you became an output machine, right? So I don't think we can get rid of screens for a whole week anymore, but maybe we can get rid of screens for, like, I don't know, the 2 hours before we go to bed. Sorry about that. Or I don't know if you heard that ding. Or the Sunday or, Saturday afternoon or something. And I think at first you're going to go through withdrawals. And just like we're like drug addicts, if you get addicted to the dopamine hit, it's hard to get off that because it feels like pain at first. You feel agitated. But if you can ride out the agitation, I think you will get to the point where you feel a tremendous calm that you haven't felt for a long time.
No, I love that what you said. I mean, me and Richard both have like a lot of time restrictions on our social media, trying to, you know, put us back more in the real world, and it's super important. And speaking of like, another piece of technology that is today, I think that it's artificial intelligence, right? And it's
Oh,
using like ChatGPT and stuff. And I do want to know your thoughts when it comes to, because a lot of screenwriters are using it to maybe generate ideas or write certain things. So I do wonder like what your thoughts on that is.
horrible. Well, okay. So some years ago, someone said to me, they said, I'm going to tell AI to write a scene for Before Sunrise. It was garbage. It was garbage. And so I thought, yes, it can't beat me. Nowadays, I think it's getting better, right? But I still don't know that it has the soul, you know? Like does it have the and all the weird imperfections that we have and all the weird quirks that we have? I mean, recently somebody convinced me that it can be helpful for some tasks because I had my feet I had my heels dug into the dirt like a mule, and I was like, no, 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 and they were like, let me show you. And they put something in and it was like, okay, well, that's not bad, I see what you mean, it did a good job of summarizing something. But um but I'm scared of it. I'm frightened. I can't stop thinking about that scene in 2001, where Hal, I can't, I think about that. It scares the hell out of me, frankly. But it's because it's new technology, and people were scared when airplanes were invented and when cars were invented, and my grandmother could never figure out how to use the DVD player, and so I don't know. I'm just I want to think that it's never going to have the soul that we have, but that's what I think.
Yeah, no, and I do think, you know, what makes stories such a beautiful thing is that soul that, you have and that life that you put into it from your experiences interacting with people that, from traveling. And I do really think it's so cool that a lot of the Before trilogy was inspired by your travels in Europe. And I do wonder, when you travel, are you usually like trying to think of movie ideas, or do you usually like, fully immerse in the culture? And like, what is your approach to traveling?
Oh, God. Well, so my approach to traveling is sort of like my approach to creativity. It's like I have a general idea of some things I want to do. I come up with a few signposts along the way, but then within that I let there be a lot of oxygen and space, just in case I'm inspired to turn off the road, and just in case I meet some interesting person and I want to talk to them rather than go to the museum or whatever it is. So I like to have a general idea, but I don't like to micromanage it, so that there's loads and loads of space for magic to happen. But I'm a firm believer in travel. I think that people who travel really get an education. I mean, to see what it's like to compare your culture to another culture is one of the best you can't even describe it to anybody. You have to experience it for yourselves, and then your eyes open up to big things that no one could have ever really taught you, or you could have even read about possibly. You have to experience it for yourself. So I'm a big believer in travel.
Nice.
Likewise,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I feel like one of the magical things about films is that it sort of imitates a little bit the experience of being somewhere else, in someone else's shoes. And, like the Before trilogy,
Mhm.
we're in cities that, unless you're from that city, are not necessarily familiar with. And it's such a magical feeling to be able to step in their shoes. Um,
Mhm.
I do wonder though, how does a creative stay um, Richard Linklater talked about this, I think, on another podcast, but he said that it's sometimes difficult to see a moment in your own life or someone else's life and not have the first reaction be, oh, this will be a cool idea for a film. Instead of trying to just be there and be present, I feel like a lot of times I struggle with thinking that, oh, you know what, this is a cool movie idea instead of processing it at first. So how do you stay, I guess, not too much in your head as a filmmaker who's always coming up with story ideas and really just experience life as it is?
I call those people who think that way idea people. So I suspect you're an idea person. I'm actually not an idea person. I don't walk around thinking of film ideas. But when I do have one, I go for the long haul. Like I really take it all the way because it really sunk in deeply. So I just think there are two different kinds of filmmakers. Idea people who are always thinking of ideas, and I think of them as plot people too. I'm more I think I'm more present in the experience, but one day I might go, God, now that I'm thinking of it, I want to write about this. This goes so deeply. So I think I'm more of a character person. And I just think you have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you're an idea person, sometimes the problem is going for the long haul because you're jumping from idea to idea to idea. And for those people, I always say, go with the idea that excites you the most, because that will probably have the most juice for you. Don't go with an idea just because you're intellectualizing it and thinking, oh, that would sell. I mean, I don't think that's a good place to come from. Instead of thinking that will sell, think to yourself, this will be a really personal journey for me in writing it. Because I think if you go deeply into the self, you might hit a universal vein that then boomerangs back out to everybody.
Right. And that was kind of, it's kind of a struggle with all creatives is that marketability versus, what's true to yourself. And I do wonder, like, when you write, how much do you take into consideration, like, what is other people watching today, and how can we get that sold to like a producer versus, that's only something I like love and that's what I'm gonna make. Like, how do you balance those things?
I think I'm getting better at this sort of thing because I used to stick to my guns, and the scripts I wrote would be too expensive to make. Like, people would say, we absolutely love it, but this is like crazy expensive, and I'd be like, you're right. So these days I'm being more mindful of the producer's quandary. I'm thinking, how can I tell this story in a creative way that is inexpensive? How can I tell this story in a creative way that also touches younger people? What would they be interested? What was I interested in when I was their age? What would have inspired me? So um I think this is something you just get better at with practice. You think to yourself, okay, if I had a limited budget, could I tell this story? If not, if it's too expensive, what would be a more affordable way to tell the story? Or what would be a way that would touch a broader audience? And I hate to think that way because I want to stick to my artistic guns and not be a quote unquote sellout. But that's actually, how I've actually come to think that being an artiste like that is kind of silly sometimes, because we do live in a real world. And if social media has taught me anything, it's that we're all marketing ourselves all the time. You know, like we can't we've got to pick and choose what we're sharing. So why not do that with our creativity as well? So I think I'm expanding more to that idea. You guys maybe have been raised with that because you were raised with social media. So you may be coming from a different angle of like marketing the idea and the self, and can I make it with my phone and blah, blah. So, hopefully we'll meet at some point and everyone enjoys everybody else's work.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I'm curious though, because we talk a lot about like, writing stuff and like improving by experiencing life, right? So I wonder like is what are your if you were to meet like a new screenwriter at a coffee shop and they asked you like that they just started out, like what are three things they can do to advance their writing abilities and even maybe advancing their career? Like what would you tell them?
I would say um, keep a journal. I would say put a sign on your desk over your computer that says write a piece of crap. I would say read. I'm going to give you more than three. I would say read. I would say pay attention to what really touches you and believe in that. Believe in what touches you. I would say if somebody else likes something and you don't like it, stick to your guns because you're allowed to love what you love. I would say with the movies since you want to be a screenwriter, with the movies and with the television shows that you've loved, what has it been that you've loved? And you'll start to notice patterns. You'll notice, you could even probably, if you were to think about your favorite stories, what do the characters have in common? What quandaries do they have that are similar? You will find that there are storylines that touch you. I'll bet you anything that you're heading in the direction of telling a story like that. And it'll come out in an original way because you are you and you can't help but be original. So I think that was about six or something.
No, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I wonder, you spoke on reading books, and I do wonder what are your favorite like screenwriting books and versus other reading. Oh, okay. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm not a big fan of screenwriting books because I had never taken a film class or read a screenwriting book when I wrote a screenplay with Richard Linklater before Sunrise. And when I tried to read them later, they were so formulaic that I tend to think that you will do something new if you don't overstudy things. So I think put your screenwriting books away for now, and maybe you will come up with something new. So I don't read screenwriting books. It's not that, I'm sure there are some good ones out there, but the super formulaic books I saw just I think that you are actually an expert at story just because you're a human being, and human beings are storytelling animals. So I think that you just need to open a creative door in yourself and don't go to somebody else to give you a formula.
Right. No, I love that. That's so well said. And I think that does go against a lot of the things we're told by school is to read
Yeah.
all these books and study all these structures. And it is true, like if you want to do something new, you can't be sticking to what's been done for so many years. And I love
Right.
that. And I do wonder, like, so, but going back to the reading, like, what specific kind of things are you referring to when you say to read more?
Oh, read, like, I think everybody should read a lot of like classic literature and just understand where, say, your culture has been. Like I made a point when I was in college of making a list for myself of all the important English novels written in English. I also included some world literature that had been translated because I wanted to understand the world. And so I had this gigantic, gigantic list, and I gradually made my way through it. I mean, there were some poets in there and plays and everything, but I wanted to be a literate person. And I know that the list has probably changed a bit now because we're, several decades down the line, but I think that to understand your culture, like for example, in this country, when I teach at a college, and I have the students read some basic letters that were really important to the dawn of this country, like the Declaration of Independence, which is a fairly short letter, but it's basically it's how and why our country began, and it's super dynamic. I mean, it's filled with all this anger, righteous anger, and it's a great, great letter. And I have them read Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, because I mean, if you want to empathize with African Americans and what they've been through, it's a fairly short letter that Martin Luther King wrote while he was in jail. And a bunch of my students have never read it. And it's like, my God, I mean, this is, if you're an American, you need to read Letter from Birmingham Jail. And then we go way back in time and we read a Greek piece by Plato called Allegory of the Cave, because it's about free thinking. And so all of these documents will teach you something about what it is to be human. And one, written like 250 years ago, one written 60 years ago, and the other written like 2,300 years ago or something. But the more you do that, the more you understand where human beings are coming from. Like we've been struggling for eons to express ourselves, to be free, to have rights, to get along with our neighbors. We've been struggling to have love in our lives. These are human and they've been around forever. So the more you read basic, like solid respect, well, not even, respected and probably not respected work, the more you understand what it is to be human.
That's so beautifully
Yeah.
said. And yeah, I totally like that is something I strive to do is to like find not only inspiration but also just educating myself through other mediums like literature, like historical documents, like painting, music, psychology, or even, the sciences, because, science fiction is such a big part of the pool of fiction that we have and the stories that we tell. I do wonder though if, just as a thought experiment, if you had the attention of the world for 30 seconds and you had to say something, what would it be?
That well, we're all, these are human beings that I'm talking to. I'm assuming that
Yes.
we're all one, that we're all one, that we're one big family, that we, when we get together, we really are stronger, and we help each other. And if social media has taught us anything, it's that we can be friends with people all over the world, and we can share, and we all have the same, we all want the same things in life. We all want to experience love and connection, and we all, we all cry the same tears. So I think it would be to we need to get together. I think that would be my message.
That's beautiful. Sweet. I am back with the notebook of questions from our
Okay.
previous guest.
Okay.
And our previous guest asked, do you have any regrets? If so, would you go backwards and change it?
You know, here's the problem is that you don't know what gifts your regrets gave you, because, of course, I've made a million mistakes, millions and millions of mistakes, but I've done a lot of things right. And I don't really know which ones were the, you know, you don't really know exactly. But looking back, I'm afraid that if I get rid of my regrets, that then I won't have the fuel and the juice, because those say like being in a bad relationship or something like that, they gave you strength too. So on the surface, I would want to go back, but on a deeper level, since I can't go back, I'm going to say no, because I think those mistakes gave me strengths.
That's beautiful.
Kim, I know we're at time, but thank you so much for joining our show. It's really an incredible opportunity to get to speak to you and talk about your work and how younger screenwriters and filmmakers should navigate the world and their careers. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
It's
you.
been it's been really nice talking to both of you. I thought your questions were great. So thank you so much, and best of luck to both of you.